Millionaire saw his former maid sleeping in the airport. What he did next shocked everyone. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Maria whispered, clutching her plastic bag in the luxury hotel suite. Alexander Thorne, the billionaire who had destroyed her life 12 years ago, stood before the woman he'd fired without mercy, now homeless and broken. "Because I owe you everything," he said, his voice cracking. But Maria's next words would shatter him completely. "Please hit the subscribe button. Like and share in the comments below where you are watching from. Your support means a lot." Alexander Thorne had destroyed lives before. Bought companies, fired thousands, crushed competitors without blinking. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to see at 11:47 p.m. in Terminal C. The billionaire CEO strode through the nearly empty airport, his $3,000 suit wrinkled from another pointless business dinner. Flight delayed. Driver dismissed. Just him and the fluorescent hell of an overnight airport, where his billions meant absolutely nothing. He was walking toward gate 23 when he froze. There, on a hard plastic bench, lay a woman he hadn't seen in 12 years. A woman whose life he had shattered with a single signature on a severance paper. But tonight felt different. His latest acquisition had left a bitter taste. Another family business crushed, more jobs eliminated. The champagne at dinner had tasted like poison. He had dismissed his driver hours ago, needing to walk off the familiar emptiness that followed every victory. The red-eye to New York, delayed indefinitely. Mechanical issues, they said. Perfect. Just perfect. Another acquisition completed, he muttered, loosening his tie. Another company dead. Another victory that felt like a defeat. At 62, Alexander Thorne commanded an empire worth $4.2 billion, but standing in this airport at midnight, he felt like he owned nothing at all. The business lounge had closed an hour ago, forcing even first-class passengers into the general terminal. Alexander found himself wandering toward gate 23, drawn by some invisible current he couldn't name. Perhaps it was the silence there, away from the restless energy of the main concourse. Perhaps it was the memory of other airports, other nights when he'd been too busy building his legacy to notice he was dismantling his life. That's when he saw her. Even from 50 feet away, even after 12 years of deliberate forgetting, recognition hit him like a physical blow. The gentle curve of her shoulders, the way she held herself even in sleep, with dignity intact despite circumstances that would crush lesser spirits. Her gray hair, once kept in the neat bun he remembered, now escaped from a worn headscarf that had seen better decades. Maria Jackson, the woman who had raised his daughter when he was too consumed with conquering markets to notice Emma's first words, first steps, first heartbreak. Maria, who had been the steady heartbeat in a home that had forgotten how to breathe after Catherine's death. Maria, who had held their fractured family together with patience and grace while he systematically destroyed everything good in his life. Maria, whom he had dismissed without severance on a gray Tuesday morning 12 years ago, when her gentle presence became an unbearable reminder of the man he used to be. Now she lay curled on a bench designed for temporary waiting, her weathered hands, the same hands that had braided Emma's hair and made Sunday morning pancakes, clutched around a plastic grocery bag that appeared to contain her only possessions. The fluorescent lights cast cruel shadows across her face, highlighting every line that poverty and hardship had etched there. Alexander's chest constricted, as if someone had reached inside and squeezed his heart with an iron fist. This woman, who had been more of a mother to Emma than he had ever been a father, was sleeping in an airport. While he owned mansions he'd never visited, penthouses that served as tax write-offs, and vacation homes gathering dust across 3 continents, she had nowhere to rest her head. The sight transported him back 13 years, to the last Christmas before Catherine's diagnosis. He could see Maria in their kitchen, flour dusting her dark hands as she taught 8-year-old Emma to roll pie crust. Her warm laughter had filled corners of their house that his presence never reached, and Emma's delighted giggles had created a music he'd been too busy to appreciate. Even then, even before grief turned him into a stranger to his own life, he had taken Maria's devotion for granted. "What have I done?" he whispered, the words barely audible above the terminal's ambient noise. A security guard approached Maria's bench with the practiced efficiency of someone who dealt with displaced souls nightly. Alexander watched, frozen in place, as the young man gently shook her shoulder. Maria stirred with the careful movements of someone whose body had learned to expect pain, sitting up slowly and gathering what little dignity homelessness allowed. She didn't protest. She didn't argue or demand rights she knew she didn't have. Instead, she apologized softly, courteously, in the same gentle voice Alexander remembered from countless mornings when she'd served him coffee and asked about his day with genuine interest he'd never deserved. The security guard's face softened as he pointed toward a distant 24-hour cafe, his gesture kind but firm. Here was humanity in its most basic form. One person trying to help another within the constraints of rules neither of them had written. As Maria slowly gathered her plastic bag and stood on unsteady legs, Alexander felt something crack open in his chest, a fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart after Catherine's funeral. For the first time in over a decade, he felt the stirring of something beyond regret and self-loathing. He felt the possibility of redemption. But as he watched Maria shuffle toward the distant glow of the cafe, her shoulders straight despite everything life had taken from her, Alexander Thorne, master of the universe, commander of billions, found himself paralyzed by a question that had haunted him for 12 years. Was it too late to become the man he should have been all along? The clock on the departure board clicked over to midnight, and somewhere in Terminal C, two lives stood at the precipice of a moment that would change everything. But would a man who had spent decades running from his past finally find the courage to face it? What do you think drives someone to cut all ties with the people who cared for them most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Maria Jackson. The name hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Even after 12 years, even with her hair now gray and her clothes worn thin, he knew that face. Those hands. That gentle way she held herself, even sleeping on a bench like a forgotten soul. Alexander's mind crashed back to 2013, the worst year of his life. Catherine had been dead for 6 months. 8-year-old Emma barely spoke anymore. The house felt like a mausoleum, and he was drowning in grief so deep he couldn't see daylight. Every morning, Maria would arrive at 6 a.m. sharp, her warm smile a stark contrast to the cold emptiness that had swallowed his family whole. She never asked questions about his drinking, never commented on the fact that he hadn't hugged his daughter in weeks. She just held everything together, made breakfast, walked Emma to school, helped with homework, sang old spirituals while she cleaned, her voice filling the silence that Alexander couldn't bear to break. "Mr. Thorne," she would say softly when he emerged from his office at midnight, still in yesterday's clothes. "I made you a plate. It's in the refrigerator." She never judged, never pushed, just existed like a guardian angel in their broken home. But that only made it worse. Every morning, seeing Maria's patient face reminded him of Catherine's funeral, of Emma's tears, of his complete failure as a husband and father. Catherine had hired Maria when Emma was born, and Maria had loved them both with a fierce, protective devotion that Alexander knew he didn't deserve. The worst part? Emma adored her. While Alexander hid in his office, drowning in work and whiskey, Maria became Emma's world. She taught her to braid friendship bracelets, read bedtime stories in voices that made Emma giggle, held her when nightmares about Mommy's death crept in. Maria did everything Alexander should have been doing, and he hated himself for it. So on that gray Tuesday in March 2013, he did what he always did when emotions became unbearable. He destroyed everything good. He'd waited until Emma left for school. Maria was in the kitchen, humming while she prepared his coffee, 3 sugars, splash of cream, just how Catherine used to make it. The normalcy of it, the kindness, the way she still treated him like a decent man when they both knew he wasn't, it was suffocating him. "Maria," she'd turned, her dark eyes warm with that gentle concern he'd grown to despise in himself. "We need to talk." Even now, 12 years later, standing in this airport hell, Alexander could remember the exact moment her face changed. The way hope died in her eyes when he handed her the envelope. "Your services are no longer required," he'd said, the words as cold as winter rain. No severance, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the 9 years she'd devoted to his family. "But Mr. Thorne," she'd whispered, her voice breaking, Emma needs to learn that people leave." The cruelty in his own voice had shocked even him. Just like her mother did, Maria had stood there for a long moment, holding that envelope like it contained poison. Then she'd set down his coffee, 3 sugars, splash of cream, and walked to the door. She'd paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorknob. "I'll pray for you both," she'd said quietly. "Every single day." And then she was gone. Emma had cried for weeks. Begged him to bring Maria back. Asked what she'd done wrong, why Maria didn't want to see her anymore. Alexander had lied, told her Maria had found a better job, moved away. Anything to avoid explaining that he'd fired the only person keeping their family from completely falling apart. That was the beginning of the end. Within 2 years, Emma stopped trying to connect with him altogether. By 16, she was living with Catherine's sister. By 18, she'd moved across the country for college and never looked back. Now, at 32, Emma sent him exactly 2 communications per year. A birthday card with no personal message and a Christmas card with the same. No phone calls, no visits, no forgiveness. And it was all his fault. Standing here in Terminal C, watching a security guard gently wake the woman who had once been his family's saving grace, Alexander felt the weight of every terrible decision he'd ever made. Maria was homeless. Emma was gone. Catherine was dead. And he was alone. But as he watched Maria gather her meager possessions with the same quiet dignity she'd shown in his kitchen all those years ago, something shifted inside him. For the first time since Catherine's funeral, Alexander Thorne felt something besides self-pity and regret. He felt rage. Not at Maria. Not at Emma. Not even at God for taking Catherine too soon. He felt rage at himself. Because this woman, this beautiful, kind, devoted woman, should be living in comfort somewhere, surrounded by grandchildren and love. Instead, she was sleeping in airports because a coward in an expensive suit had been too broken to handle her goodness. The security guard was being kind, pointing her toward a 24-hour cafe where she could wait until morning. But Alexander knew how this story ended. He'd seen enough homeless people shuffled from place to place, surviving on scraps of mercy from strangers. Not Maria. Not on his watch. For the first time in 12 years, Alexander Thorne knew exactly what he had to do. The question wasn't whether he could afford to help her. His black card could buy this entire terminal if he wanted. The question was whether he had the courage to face the woman whose life he'd destroyed, and whether she had any reason left to believe in second chances. As Maria slowly walked toward the distant glow of the cafe, her shoulders straight despite her circumstances, Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced since before Catherine's diagnosis. Hope. Sometimes the people we hurt the most are the ones who loved us best. Think about Alexander's choice to fire Maria. Was it really about protecting Emma, or protecting himself from painful reminders? Share your thoughts below about how grief can make us push away the very people we need most. Alexander's feet moved before his brain could stop them. 12 years of cowardice ended in 10 seconds of pure instinct. He found himself walking across Terminal C, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Maria was halfway to the cafe, moving slowly, carefully, like someone whose body had learned to expect pain. "Maria." The word came out rougher than he'd intended. She stopped, her shoulders tensing. For a moment, she didn't turn around, and Alexander wondered if she'd recognized his voice. Wondered if she'd keep walking and pretend she hadn't heard. Then she turned. Tam stopped. Her face, God, her face. The years hadn't been kind. Lines mapped the territory around her dark eyes, and her cheeks had hollowed in ways that spoke of too many missed meals. But those eyes were exactly the same. Warm, intelligent, patient, and completely shocked. "Mr. Thorne?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Alexander opened his mouth to speak and found nothing. "What did you say to someone whose life you destroyed?" "Sorry?" That seemed inadequate, like apologizing for a nuclear bomb with a Hallmark card. Maria's grip tightened on her plastic bag. Her eyes darted around the terminal as if looking for an escape route. The security guard was watching from a distance, probably wondering if this well-dressed man was bothering the homeless woman. Alexander started, then stopped. His throat felt like sandpaper. "I saw you sleeping on the bench." Stupid. Obvious. But it was all he could manage. Maria's chin lifted slightly, not defiant, but dignified. "I'm not causing any trouble. The guard said I could wait in the cafe until—" "No." The word came out harder than he meant. "That's not. I wasn't." He took a breath, forced himself to slow down. Maria, what happened? Where have you been living? The question hung between them like a live wire. Maria's eyes searched his face, looking for something, mockery, perhaps, or pity. Finding neither seemed to confuse her more than comfort her. That's not your concern anymore, Mr. Thorne. The politeness in her voice was devastating. After everything, after 12 years of silence, after seeing her sleeping on a bench in an airport, she was still calling him Mr. Thorne, still treating him with more respect than he'd ever shown her. It should be, he said quietly. It should have been all along. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. I have to go, she said, taking a step toward the cafe. They're expecting me to. Wait. Alexander stepped forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Maria flinched, and he froze, horrified. When had she learned to expect violence from well-dressed men? What had the last 12 years done to her? Please, he said, dropping his hand to his side. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Maria looked at him for a long moment. In that silence, Alexander heard the ambient noise of the terminal, the distant hum of cleaning equipment, the occasional announcement over the PA system, the soft sobbing of a woman on a phone call 3 gates away. Why? Maria asked finally. The question sucker-punched him. Why indeed? Because he was guilty? Because he was lonely? Because seeing her like this had cracked something open in his chest that he'd kept sealed for over a decade? Because I owe you an explanation, he said. Because what I did to you is unforgivable, and I've spent 12 years knowing it. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Thorne. But her voice was softer now, uncertain. I owe you everything. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Maria, you held my family together when I was falling apart. You loved Emma when I didn't know how to anymore. You made our house a home after Catherine died, and I destroyed that. I destroyed you. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. 12 years of hardship had taught her not to waste water on things that couldn't be changed. Emma, she whispered. How is Emma? The question hit Alexander like a physical blow. Of course, that would be her first concern. Not her own suffering, not the injustice of what he'd done to her, but the little girl she'd helped raise. Gone, he said simply. She's 32 now. Lives in Seattle. We don't speak. Maria's face crumpled for just a moment before she composed herself. I'm sorry. She was apologizing. To him. For his failures as a father. Don't, Alexander said roughly. Don't apologize for my mistakes. He looked around the terminal, suddenly aware that they were having the most important conversation of his life, standing next to a departure gate like strangers waiting for different flights. Maria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Where are you living? She was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Wherever I can. There's a shelter downtown, but it's full most nights. Sometimes the Salvation Army has space. Sometimes. She gestured vaguely at the bench where she'd been sleeping. Alexander felt something die inside his chest. This woman who had been family, who had given years of her life to caring for people who couldn't appreciate her properly, was living on the streets. How long? He asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. Maria studied his face again, searching for something. 3 years, she said finally. Since my landlord sold the building. I was cleaning offices downtown, but the company moved operations to India. Unemployment ran out. Social Security doesn't start for another 3 years. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading a grocery list instead of describing a descent into homelessness. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to hit something, wanted to scream, wanted to turn back time and undo every cruel decision that had led to this moment. Instead, he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Maria asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Calling my assistant. Alexander's fingers moved over the screen with practiced efficiency. Jennifer, I know it's late, but I need you to book the presidential suite at the Four Seasons downtown. Tonight. Yes, I know it's midnight. Use the emergency contact number. He paused, looking at Maria. And I need a car service here at the airport in 20 minutes. Mr. Thorne, Maria said, stepping back. I can't accept. You're not accepting charity, Alexander said, ending the call. You're accepting an apology. A very small, very inadequate apology for the worst decision I've ever made. I don't understand. Alexander looked at this woman, this good, kind, broken woman who had once made his daughter laugh and his house feel like home, and felt the last of his emotional walls crumble. I fired you because I was a coward, he said. Because looking at you reminded me of everything I'd lost and everything I was failing to be. I took my grief and my guilt and my rage at God, and I aimed it at the one person who didn't deserve it, the one person who was trying to save what was left of my family. Maria's tears came freely now, 12 years of suppressed grief finally finding its voice. You want to know the truth? Alexander continued, his own voice breaking. Emma stopped talking to me not because Catherine died, but because I sent you away. She never forgave me for that, and she was right not to. The terminal swirled around them, travelers and workers continuing their midnight routines, oblivious to the fact that 2 lives were being reconstructed in real time. The car will be here soon, Alexander said gently. Will you let me do this? Will you let me try to make this right? Maria looked at him for a long moment, her bag clutched in hands that had once braided his daughter's hair and made coffee with 3 sugars and a splash of cream. This won't bring Emma back, she said quietly. No, Alexander agreed. But maybe it's a start. In that moment, Maria Jackson faced an impossible choice. Trust the man who had destroyed her life, or continue surviving on the margins of a world that had forgotten her worth. What would you do if someone from your past, someone who had hurt you deeply, suddenly appeared offering redemption? The Four Seasons lobby at 1:30 a.m. was a study in understated luxury. Marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, soft classical music drifting from hidden speakers, and staff who moved with the practiced discretion of those accustomed to serving the ultra-wealthy at any hour. Maria Jackson stood frozen just inside the entrance, her plastic bag clutched against her chest like armor. The contrast was devastating, her worn clothing and weathered face against the backdrop of wealth so casual it decorated the air itself. Mr. Thorne, the night manager, approached with a smile that cost $10,000 in hospitality training. Your suite is ready. The presidential floor, as requested. Alexander nodded, but his attention was fixed on Maria. She hadn't spoken during the 15-minute car ride from the airport, just stared out the window at the city she'd once called home, but now wandered like a ghost. Her silence was worse than anger would have been. Maria, he said softly, are you all right? She turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the lobby's golden light. I haven't been inside a place like this in. She paused, calculating. Maybe never. The admission hit Alexander like a slap. This woman had worked in his home for 9 years, had been family, and he'd never once considered bringing her somewhere beautiful. Never thought to show her that she mattered beyond her utility. Mrs. Jackson, the manager said, turning his professional smile toward Maria. Right this way to the elevators. Maria flinched at being addressed directly, her grip tightening on her bag. But she followed, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. The presidential suite occupied the entire 42nd floor. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city's sleeping skyline, and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. Alexander watched Maria take it in, her expression carefully neutral. The bedroom is through there, he said, pointing to the master suite. I'll take the couch. Mr. Thorne, you don't have to. Alexander. The correction came out more forcefully than he'd intended. Please. Just. Alexander. Maria set her plastic bag down on a side table that probably cost more than her last month's rent. The bag looked obscene in this setting, a stark reminder of how far she'd fallen and how far he'd risen on the backs of others. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said quietly. Alexander loosened his tie, suddenly exhausted. Because I've spent 12 years lying to myself about what kind of man I am. Tonight, seeing you in that airport, I couldn't lie anymore. And what kind of man are you? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Alexander walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in boardrooms and penthouses, other men like him were making decisions that would destroy lives. Other families were being sacrificed on the altar of profit margins and quarterly reports. The kind who destroys everything good in his life because he's too afraid to deserve it. Maria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. You mentioned Emma stopped talking to you because of what you did to me. Alexander's reflection in the window looked older than his 62 years. She was 16 when she moved in with Catherine's sister. Told me she couldn't live with someone who threw away people who loved us. She wasn't wrong. She loved you. Past tense. Children don't stop loving their parents, Alexander. They just stop believing their parents love them back. The use of his first name, the first time she'd said it in over a decade, nearly brought him to his knees. There was something in her voice, a gentleness that he didn't deserve but desperately needed. I tried to call her, he said. After you left. She wouldn't speak to me. Wouldn't come out of her room. Catherine's sister said I was traumatizing her more by staying, so I left. Told myself it was for Emma's own good. And you believe that? Alexander turned from the window to face Maria. She had sat down on the edge of the couch, her posture perfect despite her exhaustion. Even now, even after everything, she carried herself with dignity. I convinced myself of a lot of things, he said. That Emma was better off without me. That you'd find another job easily. That I was protecting everyone by removing myself from the equation. And what do you believe now? The question was a trap, but not a malicious one. Maria had always been able to see through his rationalizations, cut straight to the truth he was avoiding. It was one of the things that had made her presence both comforting and terrifying. I believe I was a coward who destroyed his family because he couldn't handle his own grief. Maria nodded slowly. That's a start. The silence stretched between them, filled with 12 years of unspoken words. Alexander found himself studying Maria's face, looking for traces of the woman who used to hum while she worked, who made Emma giggle with silly voices during story time. The kindness was still there, but it was guarded now, protected by walls that his cruelty had built. Can I ask you something? Alexander said. You've been asking me things all night. This is different. He sat down across from her, careful to maintain distance. Why didn't you hate me? When I fired you, when I gave you that envelope with no explanation, no severance, why didn't you curse me out? Tell me what a bastard I was. Maria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I could see you were already cursing yourself more than I ever could. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He'd expected anger, resentment, justified rage. Instead, she'd seen his pain and chosen compassion. Even then, even in the moment he was destroying her life, she'd tried to understand. I should have fought for you, he said. I should have fought for Emma. Instead, I ran. People do what they think they have to do to survive, Maria said. Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes it means running. Sometimes it means forgiving people who don't deserve it. Do I deserve it? Maria looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out. Alexander felt something crack open in his chest, not the sharp pain of earlier, but something warmer. Something that might have been hope. Maria, he said carefully, what would it take to make this right? Not just tonight, not just this hotel room, but really right. She was quiet again, thinking. Outside the windows, the city began its slow transformation from night to dawn, the sky lightening from black to deep purple. Emma, she said finally. It would take Emma. Alexander's heart sank. She won't see me. She won't take my calls. I don't even know her address. Then you'll have to find another way. What way? Maria smiled for the first time since he'd found her in the airport, a small, sad smile that broke his heart and put it back together simultaneously. You're a billionaire, Alexander. You've built an empire by solving impossible problems. Surely you can figure out how to apologize to your own daughter. The challenge hung in the air between them. Outside, the first hints of sunrise painted the horizon pink and gold. A new day was beginning, and for the first time in 12 years, Alexander Thorne felt like he might be worthy of seeing it. But first, he had to find a way to reach the daughter who had every reason in the world never to forgive him. And he had absolutely no idea where to start. Maria's forgiveness seems almost too generous, or is it really strength disguised as grace? Alexander woke up on the Four Seasons couch at 6 a.m. to the sound of Maria humming in the kitchen. For a moment, suspended between sleep and consciousness, he was back in his old house. Catherine was alive, Emma was 8 years old, and Maria was making breakfast while the morning sun streamed through windows that still held hope. Then reality crashed down like an avalanche. He sat up slowly, his expensive suit wrinkled beyond salvation. Maria stood at the kitchen island, wearing one of the hotel's complimentary robes, her gray hair neat despite everything. She was making coffee, and the smell transported him back 12 years. 3 sugars, splash of cream, she said without turning around. Alexander's throat tightened. You remember? I remember everything. She handed him the mug, their fingers brushing for just a moment. Her hands were rougher now, marked by years of hard labor and harder living, but they were steady. I remember Emma's first word was Mama, except she was looking at me, not Catherine. I remember how you used to pace the study at midnight, talking to yourself about quarterly reports. I remember the morning Catherine told us about the diagnosis, and how you didn't speak for 3 days. Alexander took a sip of coffee. Perfect, just like always. Why are you doing this? Making coffee? Being kind to me. I don't deserve it. Maria sat down across from him, her own mug cradled in both hands. Kindness isn't about what people deserve, Alexander. It's about who you choose to be. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Jennifer, his assistant, texting with her usual ruthless efficiency. Private investigator found Thorne's address and employment details. Sending file now. Alexander stared at the message, his coffee forgotten. In 36 hours, his assistant had accomplished what 12 years of guilt and self-pity had prevented, finding Emma. What is it? Maria asked. My assistant found Emma. The words felt strange in his mouth. Her address, where she works, everything. Maria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. And I don't know what to do with that information. Alexander set down his mug with shaking hands. What if she slams the door in my face? What if seeing me makes things worse? What if it doesn't? His phone buzzed again. This time it was the file. Alexander opened it with the same trepidation he'd once felt opening quarterly reports that could make or break companies. Emma Catherine Thorne. Age 32. Address, 1247 Pine Street, Seattle, Washington. Employment, pediatric nurse, Seattle Children's Hospital. Marital status, single. No children. But it was the photograph that stopped his heart. Emma looked exactly like Catherine. Same dark hair, same intelligent eyes, same determined set to her jaw that had made his late wife formidable in boardrooms and beautiful in everything else. But there was something in Emma's face that Catherine had never carried, a sadness that ran bone deep. She's beautiful, Maria said softly, looking at the photo over his shoulder. She's alone. Alexander scrolled through more details. Never married. No kids. She works double shifts at a children's hospital. He paused. She chose to work with children. Like someone else I know, Maria said meaningfully. Alexander continued reading, but the next line made him freeze. Under emergency contacts, there was only one name listed. Maria Jackson. Address, unknown. Phone disconnected. Maria, Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. You're still her emergency contact. Maria leaned forward to look at the screen, and Alexander watched her face change. Her carefully maintained composure cracked, and for the first time since the airport, she looked vulnerable. That's impossible, she whispered. I haven't had a permanent address in 3 years. No phone for almost as long. Alexander scrolled down further, and what he found next changed everything. Medical records. Not detailed, just enough for background checks. But the pattern was clear. Emma had been in therapy for abandonment trauma for 8 years. She'd been prescribed antidepressants twice. There was a notation about panic attacks triggered by male authority figures. And then, the detail that broke him completely, Emma had legally changed her middle name from Catherine to Maria in 2018. Emma Maria Thorne. She never forgot you, Alexander whispered, showing Maria the screen. Look at this. Emma Maria Thorne. She made you part of her name. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. Alexander kept scrolling, his hands trembling. There were more details, small pieces of a life lived in the shadow of abandonment. Emma had been valedictorian in high school, summa cum laude in college, top of her nursing class. She'd achieved everything academically, but the pattern painted a picture of someone trying to be perfect enough to be worthy of love. Just like he had, in his own way. But then Alexander found something that changed everything he thought he knew about the last 12 years. A charity registration form from 2019. Emma had established a nonprofit organization called the Maria Jackson Foundation, a fund that provided housing assistance for displaced domestic workers, particularly women of color over 50. She'd been looking for Maria. For 6 years, Emma had been trying to find the woman who'd raised her. "She's been searching for you," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "Maria, she started a foundation in your name. She's been trying to find you for 6 years." Maria sank into her chair, as if the weight of revelation was too much to bear. Why didn't she? How did she? Alexander scrolled further and found the answer. The foundation's mission statement, written in Emma's own words. "When I was 8 years old, my father fired the only mother I had left. Maria Jackson raised me with love, dignity, and grace, and she deserved better than the cruelty she received from our family. This foundation exists to ensure that women like Maria, women who dedicate their lives to caring for others, never fall through the cracks of a system that treats care as worthless and disposable. I will find Maria Jackson, and I will spend my life honoring the love she gave me when the people who should have protected her failed her instead." The coffee mug slipped from Maria's hands, shattering on the marble floor. Neither of them moved to clean it up. "She blames me," Alexander said quietly. "Not you. Me. She knows exactly what I did and why I did it." Maria was crying openly now, 12 years of suppressed grief finally finding its voice. "She was looking for me. She still is." Alexander showed her the foundation's website. Recent posts, updated monthly, always ending with the same line. "If you know Maria Jackson, formerly of Chicago, please contact us. Her family is looking for her." Her family. Not, "I am looking for her." Not, "Someone is looking for her." Her family. Emma still considered Maria family. After 12 years of separation, after a childhood torn apart by her father's cruelty, Emma had never stopped loving the woman who'd raised her. Alexander felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This wasn't just about his redemption anymore. This wasn't about his guilt or his need for forgiveness. This was about a daughter who had spent 6 years searching for the mother figure her father had stolen from her. And he was the only person who could reunite them. "Maria," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "I know how to reach Emma, and I know exactly what I need to do." For the first time since Catherine's funeral, Alexander Thorne felt like he had a purpose beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. He had a chance to fix the worst mistake of his life. But first, he had to do something he'd never done before, put someone else's happiness ahead of his own fear. Alexander stared at Emma's phone number on his screen for 20 minutes before Maria finally took the phone from his hands. "Call her," she said firmly. "If you don't, I will. She won't answer if she sees my number." Alexander's hands were shaking. "She probably blocked me years ago." Then used the hotel phone. They were still in the Four Seasons suite, the broken coffee mug cleaned up, but its memory lingering like a ghost. It was 9 a.m. in Chicago, which meant 7 a.m. in Seattle. Emma would be getting ready for her shift at Seattle Children's Hospital, following the routine that had become her anchor in a world where everyone she'd ever loved had either died or abandoned her. Alexander walked to the hotel phone, each step feeling like a mile. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but calling his own daughter made his heart hammer against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He dialed the number. 1 ring. 2. 3. "Hello." Emma's voice was cautious, professional. She'd learned not to trust unknown numbers. Alexander opened his mouth and found nothing. "How did you start a conversation with someone you'd failed so completely? How did you bridge 12 years of silence with words?" "Hello," Emma said again, impatience creeping in. She was probably late for work. "Emma." Her name came out like a prayer. It's your father." The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Alexander could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in whatever apartment she'd built as a sanctuary from the wreckage of her childhood. "How did you get this number?" Her voice was cold, professional. The same tone she probably used with difficult relatives in the hospital. "That's not important. Emma, I need to tell you something. I found." "No." The word hit like a slap. "You don't get to need anything from me. You lost that right 12 years ago. Please, just listen. I listened for years. Emma's voice was rising, 12 years of suppressed rage finally finding its target. I listened to Aunt Sarah tell me you were grieving. I listened to therapists explain that some people handle loss badly. I listened to myself make excuses for why my father threw away the only mother I had left, and then disappeared from my life entirely. Alexander felt like he was drowning. This was worse than he'd imagined, and he'd imagined it going very badly. Emma, I know I failed you. Failed me? Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. You didn't fail me, Alexander. You abandoned me. There's a difference. The use of his first name was like a knife to the chest. She couldn't even call him father anymore. You want to know what failure looks like? Emma continued, her voice breaking. Failure is forgetting to pick up your kid from soccer practice. Failure is missing a school play. What you did was deliberate destruction. You looked at an 8-year-old girl who had just lost her mother, and you decided she didn't deserve to keep the only other parent she'd ever known. I was wrong, Alexander whispered. Emma, I was so wrong. You were cruel. The word hung in the air like poison. And the worst part is, I know you knew better. I know you understood exactly how much Maria meant to me, and you chose to hurt me anyway. Alexander looked at Maria, who was sitting on the couch with tears streaming down her face. She was listening to Emma's pain, absorbing every word like a physical blow. She's here, Alexander said desperately. Emma, Maria is here with me. The silence that followed was different, sharper, more dangerous. What did you just say? I found Maria. She's been homeless, Emma. For 3 years. I found her sleeping in an airport, and You found her. Emma's voice was deadly quiet. You found the woman I've been searching for 6 years, and your first call is to me? Alexander's stomach dropped. He'd miscalculated completely. I thought you'd want to know. I want to know why you're calling me instead of helping her. Emma's voice cracked with emotion. I want to know why you think you have any right to be part of this. She was homeless, and you were what? Building another skyscraper? Buying another company? Emma, please. Put her on the phone. Now. Alexander looked at Maria, who had gone pale. She shook her head frantically, but Emma's voice came through the speaker again. I know she's there. I can hear her crying. Maria? Maria, are you there? Maria closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and walked to the phone. Her hands were shaking as she took the receiver from Alexander. Hello, baby girl, she said softly. The sound that came through the phone was primal, 12 years of suppressed grief exploding in a single, broken sob. Emma was crying so hard she couldn't speak, and Maria was crying too, holding the phone like a lifeline. I'm sorry, Emma finally managed. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you. I tried, Maria. I tried so hard. I know, baby. I know you did. The foundation. Did he tell you about the foundation? I never stopped looking. Never. He told me. Emma, you beautiful girl, you didn't need to. Yes, I did. Emma's voice was fierce now. You were my mother when he forgot how to be a father. You held me together when everything fell apart. Of course I looked for you. Alexander stood frozen, watching this reunion happen around him, but not including him. He was a witness to a love that had survived his worst efforts to destroy it, and his presence felt like a contamination. Where are you? Emma asked. Are you safe? Are you okay? I'm safe, Maria said, glancing at Alexander. I'm in a hotel in Chicago. I'm warm and fed and safe. I'm flying out today. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you. Emma, you don't have to. I'm coming to get you, Emma repeated firmly. And this time, no one is going to separate us. No one. The threat was clearly directed at Alexander, and it hit its mark. He was the villain in this story, the obstacle standing between a daughter and the woman who'd raised her with love he'd never been capable of giving. Emma, Maria said gently. Your father, he's trying to make things right. The silence that followed was arctic. My father, Emma said slowly, can go to hell. The only reason I'm not calling the police to report elder abuse is because I trust that you're actually safe. But if he has hurt you in any way. He hasn't, Maria said quickly. Emma, he found me sleeping in an airport and put me up in the nicest hotel I've ever seen. He's been nothing but kind. Too little, too late. Emma's voice was final. I'll be there tonight. What hotel? Maria gave her the details, and Emma wrote them down with the efficiency of someone used to managing crises. I love you, Emma said before hanging up. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, baby girl. The line went dead. Alexander and Maria stood in the silence of the suite, the weight of Emma's rage hanging between them like a storm cloud. Maria set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. She hates me, Alexander said quietly. She hates what you did, Maria corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She's flying here to take you away from me. She's flying here to take me home. Maria looked at him with something that might have been pity. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Alexander walked to the window, looking out at the city where he'd built his empire and destroyed his family. In a few hours, Emma would be here. She would take Maria away, and he would be alone again. But this time, he'd have no one to blame but himself. For 12 years, he'd told himself that Emma was better off without him. Now he was about to find out if that was true. And the worst part was, he was starting to suspect that it was. The moment when our past catches up with our present can be devastating, especially when we realize that our attempts to fix things might actually make them worse. Alexander thought reuniting Emma and Maria would redeem him, but instead it's highlighted just how much damage he's really done. Sometimes the people we've hurt don't want our redemption. They just want us to get out of the way. What do you think? Does everyone deserve a second chance, or do some actions put us beyond forgiveness? Alexander spent the afternoon writing a letter he should have written 12 years ago. He'd tried to leave the hotel twice. Both times, Maria had quietly asked him to stay. Not for his sake, she made clear, but for Emma's. She needs to see you face what you did, Maria had said. Running away again won't help anyone. So he stayed and he wrote. The first draft was 17 pages of self-pity and excuses. He tore it up. The second was 2 sentences. I'm sorry. I was wrong. He tore that up too. The third draft started at sunset and finished at 11 p.m., when the concierge called to announce Emma's arrival. Alexander's hands were cramped from writing, his expensive suit replaced with hotel clothes that fit poorly but felt more honest somehow. Maria had spent the day on the phone with Emma, sharing 12 years of stories in compressed bursts between Emma's layovers. Alexander heard fragments: Emma's medical school graduation, her work with pediatric cancer patients, the apartment she'd saved for months to afford. A life built in the shadow of abandonment, but filled with purpose he'd never found in all his billions. She's here, Maria said, hanging up the phone. Alexander folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. His heart was hammering so hard he wondered if this was what a heart attack felt like. The elevator chimed, and Emma stepped into the suite. Alexander's breath caught. She looked exactly like Catherine, but carried herself with a wariness Catherine had never needed. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her scrubs wrinkled from travel. She moved like someone ready to fight or flee at any moment. Her eyes found Maria first, and the transformation was instant. The guarded woman became a child again, tears streaming down her face as she ran across the room. Maria, she sobbed, falling into the older woman's arms. I found you. I finally found you. You did, baby girl. You did. They held each other for long minutes, 12 years of separation dissolving in an embrace that Alexander knew he would never be part of. He stood frozen by the window, watching his daughter come home to the woman who had truly raised her. Finally, Emma pulled back and looked at Maria with the practiced eye of a medical professional. Are you hurt? Are you sick? When did you last see a doctor? I'm fine, Emma. I'm perfectly fine now. No, you're not fine. 3 years homeless. Do you have any idea what that does to a person's health? We're getting you a full workup tomorrow. Blood tests, x-rays, everything. Alexander watched Emma catalog Maria's condition with professional efficiency, and he saw something that broke his heart. Emma was a caregiver, just like Maria had been. She'd built her entire life around taking care of people, because the people who should have taken care of her had failed. That's when Emma finally looked at him. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Emma's expression was polite, professional, and absolutely empty of any recognition that they were related. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Thank you for ensuring Maria's safety. I'll be taking her home now. Emma. To Seattle, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. I've already arranged for a furnished apartment near the hospital. Maria will have full health coverage through my employee benefits, and I've connected with several support groups for displaced domestic workers. She was being deliberately thorough, showing him exactly how much she'd thought through Maria's care while he'd been absent from both their lives. "That's very thoughtful," Alexander said quietly. "But maybe we should talk." "There's nothing to talk about." Emma's voice was final. "You found Maria, you kept her safe until I could get here, and I'm grateful for that. But that's where this ends." Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly was devastating. "I know you hate me," he said. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Emma, I need you to know. I don't hate you." Emma's words stopped him cold. "Hate requires caring about someone. You're just nothing to me." The words hit harder than rage would have. Rage meant emotion, meant connection, meant the possibility of healing. Indifference meant death. Maria stepped forward. "Emma, honey, maybe you should listen." "No." Emma's voice was gentle but firm. "Maria, I love you. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you're safe and loved and cared for. But he doesn't get to be part of that. He doesn't get to buy his way back into our lives with a hotel room and good intentions." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out the letter. His hands were shaking as he held it out to Emma. "I wrote you something," he said. "I don't expect you to read it now, or ever. But I needed to write it." Emma looked at the letter like it might bite her. "I don't want it. Please. Just take it. You can throw it away when you get home if you want." "I will throw it away." "That's your choice." Emma stared at him for a long moment, then snatched the letter from his hands. She shoved it into her jacket pocket without looking at it. "We're leaving," she announced. "Maria, do you have everything?" Maria looked around the suite, then at Alexander. "I don't have anything to pack. Everything I own fits in that bag." The reminder of Maria's homelessness hung in the air like an accusation. Emma's jaw tightened. "That's going to change," she said firmly. "Starting tonight." As they moved toward the elevator, Alexander felt panic rising in his chest. This was it. They were leaving, and he would never see either of them again. Emma would take Maria to Seattle, give her the life she deserved, and he would return to his empty empire and wait to die alone. "Emma," he called out as they reached the elevator. She turned, her finger poised over the call button. "I'm proud of you," he said. "The foundation, your work at the hospital, the woman you became, I'm proud of you." Emma's expression didn't change. "You don't get to be proud of me. You had nothing to do with who I became." "I know. That's what makes it so remarkable." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Emma and Maria stepped inside, and Alexander watched the doors begin to close on any possibility of redemption. But as the gap narrowed to just a few inches, Emma's hand shot out to stop the doors. "Maria," she said without looking at Alexander. "Did he hurt you? In any way? Be honest." Maria was quiet for a moment. "No, Emma. He's been nothing but kind." "And do you?" Emma's voice was careful, like she was afraid of the answer. "Do you want him to have our contact information? After we leave?" Alexander held his breath. Maria looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "I think," she said slowly, "that everyone deserves a chance to try to do better, even if they don't deserve forgiveness." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. "This is my number," she said, showing Alexander the screen. "If Maria ever needs anything, anything at all, you call me immediately. Not because I trust you, but because I trust her judgment. And if you ever let her down again." She didn't finish the threat. Alexander memorized the number in 2 seconds. "I won't let her down. You better not." Emma looked at him one more time, and for just a moment, he saw something in her eyes that wasn't quite indifference. "Goodbye, Alexander." The elevator doors closed. Alexander stood alone in the Four Seasons suite, surrounded by luxury that felt like a tomb. On the table sat his phone with Emma's number, a connection as fragile as spun glass. For the first time in his life, Alexander Thorne had been given not what he wanted, but what he needed. A chance to prove he could put someone else's happiness ahead of his own. The question was whether 12 years of selfishness had left him capable of rising to meet it. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most weight. Emma didn't forgive Alexander, but she gave him her number, not for his sake, but for Maria's. It's a thread-thin connection, but it's something. Do you think people can really change after decades of selfish behavior, or are some patterns too deeply ingrained? What would you do with a second chance you didn't deserve but desperately needed? Alexander's phone rang at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. Emma's number flashed on the screen, and his heart stopped. In 6 months, she had called him exactly once, to confirm that Maria had arrived safely in Seattle, and to give him a list of medical specialists for her care. This was different. This was an emergency. Emma. He was fully awake, already reaching for his clothes. Alexander. Her voice was tight, professional, but he could hear the strain underneath. Maria's in the hospital. I need you to come to Seattle. The words hit him like a physical blow. What happened? Is she? She's stable. Heart attack. Minor, but at her age. Emma's voice cracked slightly. She's been asking for you. Alexander was already moving, grabbing his wallet, his keys. I'll be on the next flight. Which hospital? Seattle Children's. I'll text you the details. Emma paused. Alexander? Hurry. The line went dead. For hours later, Alexander walked through the corridors of Seattle Children's Hospital wearing jeans and a wrinkled shirt. The first time in decades he'd appeared in public looking anything less than perfect. He didn't care. All that mattered was getting to Maria. Emma was waiting outside room 314, still in scrubs from her own shift. She looked exhausted, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail, but she stood when she saw him. How is she? Alexander asked. Awake. Stable. Asking why you're taking so long. For the first time in 12 years, Emma almost smiled. She's been worried that you won't come. I'll always come, Alexander said simply. If she needs me, I'll always come. Emma studied his face for a moment, searching for something. She's been reading your letters. Alexander's heart skipped. Letters? You've been writing to her. Every week for 6 months. She keeps them in a box next to her bed. Emma's voice was carefully neutral. She reads them to me sometimes. Alexander felt heat rise in his cheeks. The letters had been his lifeline, a way to stay connected to Maria without intruding on her new life with Emma. He'd written about his days, his work, his efforts to become someone worthy of the second chance Maria had given him. He'd never expected Emma to know about them. They're personal, he said. I know. That's why she reads them to me. Emma looked toward Maria's room. She wants me to understand that people can change. Before Alexander could respond, a weak voice called from inside the room. Is that my Alexander out there, or are you two going to stand in the hallway all day? Emma gestured toward the door. She's waiting. Alexander walked into the hospital room and felt his heart break all over again. Maria looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped with mechanical precision. But her eyes were bright, alert, and when she saw him, her face lit up with genuine joy. There's my boy, she said, holding out her hand. Alexander took it carefully, afraid she might break. Her skin was papery but warm, and her grip was surprisingly strong. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I got kicked by a horse, Maria said with a weak laugh. But I'm alive, and you're here, so I'm doing just fine. Alexander sat in the chair next to her bed. Emma said you've been reading my letters. Every single one. That woman thinks I'm trying to convince her to forgive you. Maria's eyes twinkled with mischief. Maybe I am. Maria? Hush. Let me talk. Maria shifted in her bed, wincing slightly. Alexander, do you know what you've been doing these past 6 months? Writing letters. Trying to prove I can be better. You've been showing love without expecting anything in return. Maria's voice was gentle but firm. Every letter, every check you sent to the foundation, every time you called just to make sure I was settled, you never once asked for forgiveness. Never demanded Emma speak to you. You just loved us. Quietly. From a distance. Alexander felt tears prick his eyes. It's the least I could do. No, it's the most you could do. Love without conditions. Love without guarantees. Love that serves instead of takes. Maria squeezed his hand. That's the man I always knew you could be. The door opened softly, and Emma stepped inside. She'd been listening, Alexander realized. Probably for several minutes. I read the letter, Emma said quietly. Alexander's heart stopped. Which one? The one you wrote me in Chicago. I've been carrying it around for 6 months. Emma pulled the folded paper from her pocket. I finally read it last night, after Maria's attack. Alexander waited, afraid to breathe. You didn't ask for forgiveness, Emma continued. You didn't make excuses. You just took responsibility. All of it. She looked at the letter, then at him. And you promised to spend the rest of your life proving you could be better. Even if I never spoke to you again. I meant it, Alexander said. I know. That's what scared me. Emma sat down in the other chair. For 6 months, I've been watching you keep that promise. The foundation got a $5 million anonymous donation 3 weeks after we left Chicago. Maria's medical bills disappeared. Her apartment rent is mysteriously always paid. Emma's voice was steady, but Alexander could hear the emotion underneath. You've been taking care of us without asking for anything back. Because I don't deserve anything back. Maybe not, Emma agreed. But Maria does. And I do. We deserve to have family who shows up. Who keeps promises. Who loves us enough to change. Maria was crying now, happy tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. My babies, she whispered. My 2 stubborn, beautiful babies. Emma looked at Alexander for a long moment. I'm not ready to call you Dad. I may never be ready for that. But, she took a shaky breath. I think I'm ready to call you Alexander without wanting to scream. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was recognition. It was the acknowledgement that Alexander Thorne had finally become someone worthy of being in the same room as the people he loved. That's enough, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. That's more than enough. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. Maria insisted I bring this. She's been working on it since Christmas. Alexander unwrapped the box carefully. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf, navy blue with silver threads, the colors of his old house, the house where they'd all been family once upon a time. I remembered that your father used to wear scarves like this, Maria said softly. Emma told me about the pictures Catherine showed her. I thought maybe you'd like to have something that connected you to better times. Alexander held the scarf like it was made of gold. No one had knitted anything for him since his mother died 30 years ago. No one had cared enough about his comfort, his warmth, his connection to family. I love it, he whispered. I love you both. We love you too, Maria said simply. All of us. Finally. Alexander looked at Emma, afraid to hope. We love you, Emma confirmed, her voice soft but sure. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't mean everything is fixed. But we love you, and we're willing to figure out what comes next. Together. Outside the hospital window, Seattle stretched toward the horizon, a city full of people working and loving and failing and trying again. Somewhere in those streets, other families were being torn apart by grief and pride and fear. Other children were learning that love could be conditional, that family could be temporary. But in room 314, 3 people who had lost each other in the worst possible way had found something neither forgiveness nor forgetting could provide. They had found a way forward. Together. For the first time in 12 years, Alexander Thorne felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Love that asks for nothing in return. That's the hardest kind to give and the most powerful kind to receive. Alexander spent 6 months proving he could love Maria and Emma without expecting forgiveness, and in doing so, he earned something even more precious, the chance to be family again. The Maria Jackson Community Center opened on a crisp Saturday morning in October, exactly 1 year after Alexander first saw Maria sleeping in Terminal C. Alexander stood at the back of the crowd, wearing the navy scarf Maria had knitted for him, and watching Emma cut the ribbon with the kind of pride that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. The building wasn't his largest donation. That honor went to the new pediatric wing at Seattle Children's Hospital, but it was the most important thing he'd ever built. Maria sat in the front row, her hair now professionally styled, and her clothes new but practical. She looked healthy, vibrant, nothing like the broken woman who'd been sleeping on airport benches 18 months ago. Next to her sat 3 other women, former domestic workers who'd found housing through the expanded Maria Jackson Foundation, women whose stories had become Maria's mission once she'd recovered from her heart attack. The Maria Jackson Community Center, Emma announced to the gathered crowd of social workers, city officials, and community members, exists because sometimes the people we think we've lost are actually the ones who save us. Alexander smiled at that. In the past year, he'd learned more about salvation than in all his previous 63 years combined. It wasn't a transaction. You couldn't buy it or negotiate it or leverage it. It was a gift you gave by becoming worthy of receiving it. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and families began exploring the new facility, housing assistance offices, job training programs, a child care center, and a commercial kitchen where Maria would teach cooking classes, Alexander found himself alone with Emma for the first time in months. "She looks happy," Emma said, watching Maria demonstrate pie crust techniques to a group of fascinated children. "She is happy. You both are." Alexander adjusted his scarf against the October chill. "That's all I ever wanted." "Is it?" Emma's question was gentle but direct. She'd inherited Catherine's ability to cut straight to the heart of things. Alexander considered the question seriously. A year ago, he would have lied to her to himself. Today, he told the truth. "I want to be part of it," he admitted. "Your happiness, Maria's happiness. I want to be someone you're glad to have in your lives instead of someone you have to tolerate." Emma was quiet for a moment, watching Maria laugh with the children. "You know what I realized last month?" "What?" "I can't remember the last time I had a panic attack around a male authority figure." Emma's voice was thoughtful. "Dr. Harrison thinks it's because I finally have evidence that some men actually keep their promises." Alexander felt something warm unfold in his chest. "Dr. Harrison?" "My therapist. You'd like her. She doesn't take any nonsense, but she believes in second chances." Emma glanced at him. "She thinks I should invite you to Thanksgiving." Alexander's heart stopped. "What do you think?" "I think." Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think Maria is going to cook enough food for 12 people, whether we invite you or not. And I think she'd be happier if you were there." "And you? Would you be happier?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I think I'd be curious to see what kind of grandfather you might be someday." The words hit Alexander like lightning. "Grandfather?" "Hypothetically." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly. "There's someone I've been seeing. Dr. James Chun from the cardiac unit. Nothing serious yet, but—" She smiled, and Alexander saw Catherine in that smile. Hope and possibility, and the courage to love again. "Maria already loves him. Says he reminds her of you, if you had learned to care about people before you turned 60. Alexander laughed, a real laugh, from deep in his chest. "High praise indeed. Don't let it go to your head." But Emma was smiling too. "The point is, I'm not planning on being alone forever. And when the time comes, when there are children, I want them to have all the family they can get, even the complicated parts." Alexander felt tears prick his eyes. "I'd like that. Very much." "Good. Because Maria's already planning to teach your future grandchildren how to make her famous Sunday pancakes." Emma's expression grew serious. "But Alexander? Those children will never, ever doubt that they're loved. They'll never wonder if care is conditional or if family is temporary. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I understand." Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. "They'll have the childhood you should have had. They'll have the childhood you'll help give them. Because you're not the same man who failed me 12 years ago." From across the community center courtyard, Maria waved at them, flour dusting her hands and joy radiating from her face. A year ago, she'd been homeless and forgotten. Today, she was surrounded by people who loved her, working in a building named in her honor, teaching children the same skills she'd once used to hold broken families together. "You know what the best part is?" Alexander said, waving back at Maria. "What?" "She's not taking care of us anymore. We're taking care of her." Alexander watched Maria hug one of the children who'd successfully rolled out pie dough. For the first time in her life, she gets to be the one who's cherished instead of the one doing all the cherishing. Emma followed his gaze, and her expression softened. "She deserves that. She deserves everything." Alexander pulled his scarf tighter against the wind. "And so do you." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Maria work with the children, both of them thinking about the strange journey that had brought them here. A year ago, Alexander had been a billionaire who owned everything and possessed nothing. Today, he was a man who'd learned the difference between success and significance. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, his assistant. Board meeting moved to Tuesday. New acquisition contracts need review. Tokyo calling at 6 p.m. Alexander looked at the message, then deleted it without responding. "Work emergency?" Emma asked, noticing his phone. "Nothing that can't wait." Alexander put his phone away. I have more important things to do today. Like what? Alexander smiled, watching Maria teach a little girl how to braid dough for dinner rolls. Like learning how to be family. As the afternoon sun slanted through the October sky, painting the community center in gold and amber light, Alexander Thorne stood next to his daughter and felt something he'd never experienced in all his years of billion-dollar acquisitions and corporate victories. He felt rich, not because of what he owned, but because of who loved him. Not because of what he'd built, but because of what he'd become. Not because of his empire, but because of his family, complicated, hard-won, imperfect, and absolutely precious. Maria called them over to taste test the first batch of apple pie from the new community kitchen, and as Alexander and Emma walked toward her together, he realized that some journeys end exactly where they should, not with the destination you planned, but with the home you never knew you were looking for. Sometimes the most expensive things in life, love, forgiveness, family, second chances, turn out to be the only things money can't buy but service can earn. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and work very hard to deserve it, you discover that the people you thought you'd lost forever were just waiting for you to become someone worthy of finding again. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like and comment where you are watching from, and tell me what you think about the story.